Go ahead, Sean.
I thought you were going to play the intro first.
No.
All right. Hello and welcome to TYT Community. As you guys know, I am not the host, but I am the esteemed libertarian panelist Sean Fitzgerald, stationed here in New York City. Today I'm joined by the regressive progressive, the preacher from the South, Michael James Jordan French. How are you doing, Jordan? Oh, nothing
I'm
bad.
doing well, man. Doing well. Thanks for the wonderful introduction there, brother.
We are also joined from across the pond by our British assassin, Agent 00 Stephen Buckley. How are you doing today, Stephen?
I'm alright. I think I'm slightly more suave than 007, but I'll take the compliment nonetheless.
Well, you're 00 Stephen, so check yourself. We are also here with the great host. He has a magical last name, obviously part warlock, and that is our esteemed host, Jeff Waldorf, and I'm going to throw it over to him for some great stories. How are you doing, Jeff?
Great. Thank you guys for joining us. I'm Jeff Waldorf, your host, and this is TYT Community. Welcome, everybody. Boy, we've got some great stories here for you today. We're going to talk about the OWS activist, Cicely, I never know how to say her name. Cicely McMillan. Cecily McMillan, thank you. Her sentence, she may be getting sentenced to 7 years in prison. That's kind of a horrible story, and we're going to cover that. Then we're going to go have a little fun. It was Fox and Friends. Pat Robertson, that's another fun story. Climate change debate between Bill Nye, S.E. Cupp, and some conservative douchebag who I forget whose name is. That's a lot of fun. And more. We've got some great stories. So I just want to get into that and start out with our OWS story. Now, it's been at least 2 years since the Occupy Wall Street protests started back in Zuccotti Park, and even less time since those protests were shut down by the NYPD. Now, last week marked the high-profile case of Cecily McMillan, a protester charged and now convicted of assaulting police officer Brantley Bovell. Now, the officer claimed that McMillan deliberately elbowed her in the eye while escorting her out of the park on the night of May 25, 2012. So what happened? According to Assistant District Attorney Aaron Choi, let me start that over again. So what happened? According to Assistant District Attorney Aaron Choi, Bovell was walking behind Miss McMillan with his hand on her shoulder. McMillan then allegedly asked some of the people around her the question of, "Are you filming this?" Then allegedly crouched down, bent her knees, aimed her elbow at the officer, and then jumped up to strike. Now, there is some grainy police video that shows that McMillan had indeed elbowed the officer, and photographs showed that Bovell suffered a black eye. And now, of course, he claims to experience headaches and sensitivity to light due to his injury. But that's not the whole story. McMillan claims that she elbowed the officer as a reflex to the officer allegedly grabbing her breast. And there is a picture to prove it. Let's look at that right now. So as you can see that there is a bruise on this picture from Democracy Now! Of Cecily and her injury supposedly sustained from Officer Bovell. Now, McMillan was also reported to have had a seizure in the second video after the incident took place. Now, prosecutors claim that she invented her injuries, while the defense claimed that Officer Bovell's record of bad behavior should have been admissible in this court case. Now, McMillan faces 7 years in prison for this incident, and I've got to ask you guys on the panel, is this too far? And what do you guys think about this case and the idea that she may be facing 7 years in prison for this assault?
To be fair, she's facing 2 to 7 years, right? And the mandatory minimum, I believe, in this case is 2 years. And this is why, in general, I'm against mandatory minimums, because even if you find her guilty of assault, like beyond a reasonable doubt that she elbowed this guy in the face, even though it seems very unlikely that you could find her guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, should she really get 2 to 7 years for a crime that very likely could be her just reacting to an officer grabbing her and not knowing who grabbed her? I mean, in this case, you have evidence that wasn't admitted, witnesses who weren't able to testify on her behalf, and you have a cop with a history of corruption, and to flush that out a little bit, he was involved in the ticket fixing scandal for other officers, so he's helping people get off from crimes. So you have all that, and you have the complete over-the-top thing that I'm going to dismiss right now, which is the cop saying that he's super sensitive to light after getting a black eye. Like, I've played basketball, I've got elbowed in the face, I've got a black eye, like, that happens. I'm not super sensitive to light and all that, so I think that's nonsense. So should she have been found guilty or not guilty? I guess that's a question for the jury to decide. I hope she gets a new trial, but 2 to 7 years for what very might likely be an incidental elbow seems absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a case that there's no video footage of, right before the incident, which is an issue. But with the whole he's sensitive to light thing, he's supposed to be a tough NYPD cop, and he's now a bit sensitive to light. You just think that's him trying to get as much sympathy as possible for the situation. And I think Sean's right as well, is that if kind of the woman, it depends on the situation. If it's just out of the blue and someone kind of grabbed you on the shoulder and you throw up an elbow in self-defense, and that's fine. And obviously, you're in a crowd. I don't see why the police officer, now of course the police officer isn't claiming that he laid a hand on her, but the police officer shouldn't have been that close to her if he's trying to usher out a group of people kind of out of the area. And the fact that the prosecutors are saying, oh, she's faking her injury, that could have happened any time, it wasn't necessarily the cop kind of grabbing her from behind. It's pretty hard to fake a seizure like that. And when you see the seizure video, the cops don't really seem to be hoping for a large amount of time. I think this is a case of kind of the cops circling the wagons and trying to defend one of their own. And again, history, and whilst you can't necessarily bring that up in this unrelated case, he's not a good guy, this cop. Kind of the previous history shows it, and so it seems ludicrous that this woman could receive, at a minimum 2 years. I really do hope that something is worked out so she doesn't have to serve that length of time in jail.
Right, and look, I have to add that this officer, I have to add that this officer is being sued by another protester named Austin Guest for allegedly dragging him down the aisle of a bus while intentionally banging his head on each seat. Bavell also faced another allegation of violence back in 2009 when he had been filmed on video surveillance kicking a man that was on the floor that he was arresting. So, look, his record and the NYPD, for the most part, is not actually, they're not known for having a soft touch, okay, when they arrest people or when they're dealing with the general public. So for this guy's record, I mean, it's suspect. And my kind of question is, this guy gets off for allegedly abusing others, but Cecily faces 7 years? In my opinion, that's not really even justice. And look, let's be honest, even the jury agrees with that. And they convicted her because, according to the video, she did, hit him. She did elbow him in the eye. I mean, there's more than proof of that. And the video is what did it in. It's good evidence. But according to The Guardian, one of the jurors, who did not wish to be named, said that, quote, most just wanted her to do probation, maybe some community service. But now what I'm hearing is 7 years in jail? That's ludicrous. Even a year in jail is ridiculous. So now you've got the people who convicted her saying that, wait a minute, this sentence, this possible sentence that she could be getting is absolutely ridiculous. What have we done?
Yeah, I don't know what the judge can do. I don't claim to be a legal expert at all. I don't really know how mandatory minimums work, but I mean, even 2 years, if that's the minimum, that's way too much here. I mean, even you don't even have to give the girl probation. Just the fact that she has been found guilty of assaulting a police officer, like having that on her record, like that's going to have to come up in every background check for every job interview she does. Like for what a person of her size can do to a big bad police officer with one hit, like that's enough. That's enough reprimand, and she should. Well, unless the groping allegations are true, she should face consequences. She hit a cop. You don't hit cops. Again, I don't. If what she says is true, then obviously I don't really stand by that. And that's one thing I don't want to go into. The angle I want to come into this is a little different because there's so much speculation here, and like we've got a court system and a legal system for a reason. And we've got evidence of her assaulting a cop. That's what she was charged with. We know she did it. So like I don't want to sit here and speculate and immediately side with the quote unquote liberal without knowing all the facts. I do think it's very troubling that this police officer has a history of not only a history of acting out, but of pretty much abusing the people he's supposed to be protecting, which is what seems to be the case here. But again, that doesn't absolutely, guarantee anything in this particular case. Although it does seem to stack the deck against him. What really strikes me in this, no pun intended, is the George Zimmerman defense here. Like, this is a cop, man. These are supposed to be New York's finest. They're supposed to go to the bar after their shift and gripe about how tough their job is and how much they go through. And this guy got elbowed by a girl, and he is publicly saying like now he's got like traumatic like light your traumatic sensitivity to light or whatever. Like, you got to go back into the locker room with these cops, man. Do you want to be the I can't look at the light guy? Like, what? I can't imagine this being a good career move for him, like, or a good social move or anything. Like, he's got to be ostracized for this. It's going to be the one example of cops not rallying to the defense of one another because nobody wants to rally to the defense of complete pud, if I can, you'll pardon my language there.
What? In actuality, it's actually a great thing for him to do because he can claim an injury and get disability payment and receive more of a portion of his salary when he retires. So, like, he has incentives.
Like, Anthony Bologna, Officer Bologna.
Right. But he has incentives.
Remember the guy who was spraying the Occupy protesters who now got $38,000 in damages for his distress?
He was psychologically damaged by people in the media talking about his story. But
fuck off.
Yeah, but the
thing
I want to point out about the officer's history being admissible. Now, I'm in favor of certain defendants' history, and the officer's not the defendant, but I'm in favor of certain people's history not being admissible into court. Like, for instance, we have rape shield laws in this country, so if a woman is raped, you can't use her previous sexual history as which doesn't pertain to the person who is the accuser in the court of law. But if this officer was like had accommodations and was like, I don't know, he pulled people out of rubble in 9/11 and all this bullshit, if he was like a decorated officer, you better believe they would have used his history in this particular case. And I think that his past history is pretty relevant to this case because this guy might be fired, right, in the future. But if he gets a disability and he looks like the victim in this situation, that benefits him. So I think the officer's history should have been admissible in this case, especially since his story seems ridiculous. Like, the woman said, hey, are you filming this? Got confirmation that it was being filmed, got down, and then powered for like the super elbow from the sky and dropped it on this guy's face. Like, that seems absolutely ridiculous. And no video shows her saying what the officer said that she said. You have a grainy video from far away that shows like a shape grabbing and her elbowing. Like, that's all you can see. You can't hear anything. You don't have context. You can't even hear the officer saying, "Hey, stop," and then grab her. Like,
yeah,
so
that's where I want to give the officer the benefit of the doubt here, because I've been to protests and big groups, and people treat these cops like crap. They do. They try to provoke these guys, and so, you know, again, I'm not saying she did that. I'm just saying, like, for a cop to say that happened, I find it believable. If nothing else, I guarantee you other people were, and so he was, you know, pushed to the limit. But hey, you're a police officer. It's what you signed up for. That's not an excuse. But then, like, where he completely loses me and makes me want. Like I have to actively try to remind myself, hey, you know, innocent until proven guilty, and court of laws, and I'm not, you know, the judge here, is the fact that, like, then he comes up with the, oh, my eye, oh, the light, you know, and he's got this history, so he does that after the fact. He's got this history of beating up on folks before the fact. Like, I really want to not, you know, just do the Libby McLiberson reaction and just come down on this girl's side without any regard for the facts. But God, this officer's making it really hard.
Well, like, let's not focus too much on. I don't really want to focus so much on the officer, because I think this officer he's probably a douche. I mean, let's keep it real, right? His record kind of speaks for himself. The thing that really kind of outrages me about this is the possibility that she'll be facing 2 to 7 years. Based on, you know, because we did not see what happened before the grainy video. We didn't see what prompted her to elbow this guy in the face, which she did, and the facts are there, and that is why the jury had that evidence right there, and that sealed the deal, right? We know she did it. The facts bear it out, but the sentence is what bothers me, and
To your point, this is the problem with mandatory minimums in this country, is that we think assaulting a public official, because if you guys aren't New Yorkers, but if you hit a bus driver or anything, you're in that same 2 to 7 year range, right? Assaulting a city official, we think, like, that's terrible and you should get a strict sentence. But in reality, we want our judges to use human judgment, because, yeah, technically she did assault this officer. But she caught him with an elbow once, and he got a black eye. Like, his nonsense, which may or may not be nonsense, about light sensitivity and how his life is irreparably harmed. That's all, to me, that's all nonsense to me. But this is not the same as me and my friend beating an officer with a baseball bat, right? Like, there should not be a mandatory minimum. There should be a general range, and the judge should be allowed to apply human judgment on a case-by-case basis. It's this crazy concept where we should let judges use judgment.
Yeah,
well, the thing is,
I get these mandatory minimum laws are there to deter it, to keep, like, you know, supposedly they're there to keep the attacks to one elbow from a small girl rather than Sean and his buddy beating down cops with baseball bats. But, like, you know, we think it's the 21st century. We start to realize that you can quantify a lot of things, and human behavior seems more and more each day to be one of the things we can quantify. And a lot of the data is showing that these laws that exist as a deterrent don't really serve that function. And what they do is they feed into this prison culture where now we have more people in prison than anywhere else in the world, because some little girl who felt threatened may or may not have made a dumb decision. She may have been in the right, we don't know, but the court ruled she made a dumb decision, and now she's looking at 2 to 7. Whenever just being found guilty of the dumb decision would have been more than enough punishment because of the repercussions it would have had.
Well, I mean, the thing is, we keep saying, we definitely know that she assaulted him. We don't definitely know that she assaulted him. We only know that she struck him with an elbow. If he was the one, and because, we don't have any video footage of it, we don't know, and so neither did the jury know. If he had grabbed her from behind first, he was the one who instigated the conflict. Now, okay, she might have been goading him verbally, the crowd might have been goading him verbally. That still doesn't give him the right to kind of physically grab someone as he's trying to kind of move them out of an area. So we don't know that she was the one who actually assaulted him first.
What I want to make a clarification, because I didn't want to give off that idea that we're saying that she assaulted him. No, but we do know that her elbow did go right into this dude's eye, and that's what we know. So
Yeah,
to make
I mean,
that kind of clarification, but like if she was grabbed, and there is, you know, there is that picture. We showed you that picture of her bruise, right? Being grabbed like that and elbowing somebody, that's a completely human reaction that anybody would make. Anybody.
Yeah, totally. And at the end of the day, it's really coming down to kind of the cop saying, kind of, she assaulted me, and the woman saying, he assaulted me. And at the end of the day, with, like, I know you shouldn't bring in the kind of the history of the NYPD, but with the whole recent debacle of the hashtag MyNYPD, kind of the NYPD has a history of kind of brutalizing the populace in New York at times. And so what's more likely? A small little woman kind of was just trying to defend herself and have a natural reaction to someone grabbing her from behind, or the NYPD being a little heavy-handed in trying to attack someone. It's, for me, it's obvious. Like, it's obvious to me. It doesn't bother me. But this guy's a bad cop, and he was most likely the one who he did grab her from behind, and she just defended herself with an elbow. And there's no way that she should be serving any jail time at all.
To be fair, Steven, you're kind of assuming facts that like we don't have evidence to go on.
Damn straight.
It could be very possible that the cop said freeze, hold it right there, and then he grabbed her, and then she just elbowed, like knowing it was a cop. That could be a possibility. But I think my point is we don't have that as a possibility that can be proven based on the evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. Enough that I would be satisfied that she would get 2 years, let alone 7 years. Like, there's no way that we're going to know based on the evidence that's presented that she is, like, this violent cop elbower, right? And if we make jokes on the cop because, you know, he is a joke, the fact that he's saying that he's light sensitive and all that, and the fact that we're not even talking about how the cops took revenge on her because, you know, if you touch a cop, you know, a cop is a god, then they will strike back at you, and they didn't uncuff her when she was having a seizure. So, like, they're bad cops, we know that, but we don't know how the original situation started. So I give the jury some leeway on that, but the sentence is just out of proportion, and I think a judge, a human judge, should be able to make a decision on what her sentence should be.
Right, and sort of my final point is goes back to the sentence. That's really the most egregious thing about this is getting a possibility of 2 to 7 years. Why couldn't, you know, she get community service? She does not belong in prison. She's not a hardened criminal. And putting her in jail, in prison, is going to serve nothing.
Well, Jeff, I think your final point to this story should be that she needs to move to a stand your ground state where she could have shot the cop and been okay.
Oh no, Jeff is frozen.
Hey guys, if you're watching this live right now, we are having just a real quick technical hiccup here. We'll get everything back up and running as soon as we can. We appreciate you sticking with us and bearing with us as we go through some growing pains here.
Word. Although there's a big chance that we might be off air as soon as Jeff went off air.
Yeah, I'm still showing that we're live. Let me see. I've got a friend watch the show live.
Oh, Jeff's gone for realsies.
I've still got my live indicator on.
Same.
All right, I got it too. I'm checking the video right now. We're on, but Jeff is like a ghost.
We are still on. I've got confirmation.
So what do you guys want to do? Present another story or wait for Jeffrey?
Man, that's a good question.
I say we vote. And by the way, apparently I have very bare walls. And I'm offended by that.
You have very bare walls.
Yeah, that's a criticism of me.
Well, I do speak for at least one member of our audience watching now whenever I say we miss the bunk bed. Hashtag bring back the bunk bed.
I got the ladder right here. I just moved everything around a little bit. So I could get better lighting, you know, so I look more prettier.
Did we ever get a poll finale on who was the worst, Bundy, Ted, Al, or the rancher?
No, I don't think we did. There were people in the comments that were saying that it was Clive.
I don't think anybody voted for Al.
No, I don't think they did.
I don't even really know who Al Bundy is. That's probably both my nationality and my youth.
I mean, we're still broadcasting. Does anybody have contact with Jeff?
I did just try to message him on Facebook, but he seems to have, I don't know, maybe had a power cut or something, because everything's offline for him.
Yeah, so I'm sad to report that Jeff's house actually got sucked up by a UFO in the middle of the show today, guys. So we're trying to get him back, but they don't have internet on that Wi-Fi. They don't have Wi-Fi on that.
The UFO that attacked that base in Afghanistan tried to get us to cover. You guys wouldn't do it, and now look what's happened.
Exactly.
All right. Well, hey, while Jeff's gone, let's. Unfortunately, guys, we were going to tell some really cool live video during the show tonight. Jeff had a really neat thing set up for our audience. Hopefully, we'll get that up and running here in a little bit when Jeff comes back. But until then, we'll go ahead and move on to a story that we want to cover that we didn't have a video for. This is a story about a high school here in the States. In California that uses an NFL mock-style draft to let the students pick their prom dates, and it seemed expedient to cover this tonight while the actual draft is on. By the way, could somebody comment and let us know if the Cowboys picked anyone yet? This is at Corona Del Mar High School in Newport Beach, California. This is the same high school that supposedly inspired the OC, the show from a few years ago. There's a long-standing tradition for boys to draw balloons from girls and then rank them on their desirability as a prom date. And then the boys can buy tickets, to basically draft the girl to be their prom date, and some of these tickets have gone as high as $140. The high school students use Twitter to publish the results of the draw, and there was also a rule book that was tweeted out saying that sophomores could be drafted. So you can buy a sophomore woman to a young lady to take to the prom with you if you are a senior there. The draft usually remains a secret, but over the weekend, the high school principal at the high school heard about what was going on, and sent an email to parents saying, "I'm sure that the intention of the draft is not to be harmful, but it may be. It's not okay for any student to be objectified or judged in any way." So this was not like a school fundraiser. Like, this was like the dudes are cliquey enough there and have enough clout. The social structure has nope, Jeff's back.
Sorry, I want to apologize to our viewers. We had a bit of a technical issue, but I am back and pretty much ready to go. So if we can, where are we at? Where are you guys at?
Jordan, we're gonna start the story about the high school that is putting its female students in a mock NFL draft for prom, and we were semi into that.
Yeah. And I had been informed by our producers that my microphone was a little iffy. It should be better now. Plugged in my headphones. So anyway, this is not something that the school did initially. It wasn't a fundraiser they put on. This was just a couple of guys got together and a culture developed where they kind of did this unofficially. So the principal put out a statement saying, "Hey, we shouldn't do this." and then there's going to be pushback from the students, and one of the kids says it's just a fun way to decide who you're going to be going to prom with. And then another student in true Jack Baggery tweeted, "How many of you have ever felt personally victimized by the prom draft?" Oh wait, hashtag nobody. However, the Feminist Society at a neighboring high school have criticized the draft for objectifying young women. The president there, Emily Flores, told the local paper that these boys must be very confused about the time we live in if they think that being asked to prom is such a high honor. So there's a little jab at both not only the Cliquey Society and male society, but even as tradition in the prom, generally speaking. Simply asking someone to be your prom date, that's not really the way that it's done anymore, apparently. We've got flash mobs and YouTube videos and things like that now. And so apparently this is fun and cute as some of those are. There's a downside to that, too. So I guess the question here is this a bad thing, yes or no? Is this a cattle ranch? Are we objectifying women? Or is it just kids having fun and the free market working itself out?
Okay, so I wanna jump in right away and say that there is a theoretical way to do this, where you're gonna have fun. The NFL draft is around the same time as the prom. Everybody loves to do mock drafts. There's mock drafts for TV shows. It's like the NCAA tournament. Like, everybody does brackets for stupid things. Like Bill Maher's doing the bracket for the Flip a District campaign. So there's a fun way to do this in theory. In practice, this is never gonna work out. Like, you're basically throwing all of your female students into a lottery. You're going to rank them based on their looks or personality or whatever, but you're ranking women and comparing them to each other. Like, there is no way. Like, theoretically, this could work out. We're in an equal society and all that. 1 year we do it for women, 1 year we do it for men. Then we got to include, like, the gay, transgender, bisexual people. Like, theoretically, this might sound like a good idea. But there is no way that you're going to be able to apply this without hurting somebody's feelings or starting some kind of problem, and that's what happened in this case. Like, it's especially creepy because it's high school people, so you're like objectifying high school girls, which you just don't want to do. And I understand it's an unofficial like mock draft, but like everybody on this panel knows that once you heard about this, it was going to end badly.
Yeah, but if you want to it's perfectly fine for high school boys to objectify high school girls. That's fine. I don't have any. I think the only reason that people are getting kind of a bit angry about this whole they're objectifying kind of the girls in the school and stuff is that they formalized it in a certain way. All the boys are going to be ranking the girls in their minds anyway. They're going to be talking to their friends saying, oh, who kind of is person A hotter than person B. They're already doing that. It's just that now they're doing it in a more formalized way. I don't have any huge problem with it. It's not necessary. Like, they shouldn't have to do this. I mean, in my school there were about 80 guys in our year and maybe about 12 girls. So the draft wouldn't have worked well anyway. But it's just I don't have any major problem with this. And there's a whole ton of feminist groups who are getting up in arms about this, and it's just I understand their qualms about this issue, but it's a school. If there's a significant group of girls within the school who are really unhappy with this, then maybe the administration should. The school's administration, not the Obama administration. But they should step in and say, look, you've got to stop this, guy. This is just getting a bit inappropriate. But if the vast majority of the girls are perfectly happy with it, and Jordan read out some of the quotes, and some of them are saying that, we're really happy with this, we don't mind it at all. And okay, that might just be the attractive girls who are saying that. Who knows? But if the vast majority of the...
Sorry to cut you off, Stephen. I think in all fairness, both of those quotes I read were from dudes.
A bit different.
Sure. Can you figure...
At least one of them was. I think one was a girl and one was a guy.
Yes, but I mean, at the end of the day, if the vast majority of the girls are okay with it, then I think it should be allowed to go ahead, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, there was a female junior that was asked about this, and she said that the whole premise of it is not bad at all. And she also adds, and I don't know if you read this quote, she said that the way that they labeled it as a draft isn't exactly the nicest way to ask the girl, but I don't think it's objectifying women. So my whole thing is that if they're not bothered by this, then why is it a big deal? And especially since this whole thing it's not mandatory. It's the girls can reject this. They're like, oh, I got paired up with Billy over there. Well, Billy's kind of a douche. I don't like him, so I'm not going to go on that. Tough luck. You spent $100 on your ticket. Sad day for you. I'm not going to prom with you. And they have that choice.
That's what it all hinges on, Jeff, is whether or not they do have that choice. Because the question that I have that I haven't seen from the articles I've read that kind of ties into that is where is this money going? Like, are the dudes are paying each other for this chance? Because that does seem pretty shady. Because that seems like there's already an assumption that the male students own the female students and can pay each other for favors to perform with the female students, and the other guys have to back off. But the thing is, though, like if the authors of these articles are being honest and aren't like kind of trying to get us to draw conclusions that aren't there. One of the things they're really emphasizing is the clique culture and how important the social status is in this school, and so you kind of get the impression that it's like if you get bought, you don't get to say no. Like, it's very difficult for an NFL player who gets drafted to not go to that team. And I kind of feel like that's what's going on here. So it's like, if you don't go with the guy you want to go with, then you're a social pariah, which is a pretty tough thing for a girl that age to go through, especially if this school is the way that they're portraying it.
Oh yeah, but I just want to mention Elway didn't go where he was drafted. Random sports analogy that Jordan only gets on this panel. But yeah, like if this was like a lottery type of thing, right? Like where you're gonna pair like students with other students, and you're just gonna pair them, and it's not like random ranking or whatever, and you get who you get. Like that would be weird, right? It sounds like the plot to a bad romantic like high school love movie, but that would seem more like smarter. Like if you don't have a date, right, you throw your name into the lottery and you pick a date and you just go along with it or whatever. You buy tickets then. If it was a lottery, I think that would be more interesting than this random like drafting thing, because the draft does imply like ownership. Like if you're drafted by a pro sports team like the NFL, then they own the rights to exclusive rights to negotiate with you. And if you don't go on the date, does the charity then lose that money? Because if I drafted a girl on a date and I had to pay for the opportunity to draft her, and then she didn't want to go with me, then didn't I just waste my money? Like that's so. Yeah, I get Jordan's.
Well, that's what we file under sad day for you, And look, I don't have an issue with this. Okay, first of all, let me just say that I would never pay for a prom date because I think this is fucking ridiculous. All right, so I just want to put that out there, my personal feelings aside. But why I don't have a problem with them doing this is because, first of all, it's voluntary, or as long as it's voluntary, I have no problem with this. Now, I get what I do agree with what Jordan brought up, like the social status thing, and I do think that is really important to take into consideration. If they're, have some sort of expectations on them, and it's not exactly consensual or not exactly like, you can't. It's not so easy for them to back out. Then I'll totally agree. Like maybe this shouldn't even happen. But one thing, and I don't know if you guys mentioned this, is that people who are caught doing this could face a possible suspension from school. And and it's kind of like the last story that we covered. I don't agree that there should be any sort of like punishment like that. I think that's sort of overdoing it.
Again, it all depends on whether or not, what happens if a girl says no. Now, because let's keep it real. Right. What's the other thing that happens at prom? Kids hook up. Some of them for the first. There's a big expectation for women, or for young girls, I guess I should say, that prom night, you got to put it out there or whatever. And so like you factor that into this. And if there's already kind of a, the forcing of the hand or whatever there. I mean, like when I was in college, we used to do date auctions all the time to raise money for like charity, or sororities would do it to raise money for their sororities. We won't go into how much I went for because there's not enough numbers, but something like that. It was like consensual on both ends. Like we put ourselves up on the auction block knowing like what we were doing. But if this is something where, so you think about the consequences here, like if this is not an area where, or there's not an atmosphere where these girls are comfortable saying no, then not only are you forcing them to do something they don't want and objectifying them, but there's also potential you're setting up like, some very borderline date rape situations. Now again, we don't know that that's happening. If that atmosphere is not there, then awesome. To me, this sounds like, maybe not intelligent fun, but it's high school fun. So I guess, that's the make or break for me is are these girls, like what happens if they say no to the guy that buys them?
Right. And I think I could agree with that. I mean, I'm really kind of curious to know because once again, my decision on this is really sort of, in my opinion on this, it has to be something that they want to be in and feel comfortable enough to say, hey, I don't want to fucking go to prom with this guy. You waste $50, that's a sad day for you. I'm not going to go with you because I don't like you. But there is another thing, like there's a possibly positive thing that could go along with this, assuming everything else is fine. This could be a good way for people who don't normally talk to each other or aren't in the same social clique, for somebody who's in a different group to sort of, meet and get to know this other person, right? And so that's a possible good side to it. So maybe, and I want to go back to one of the quotes, and I don't know if you mentioned this earlier, but, quote, when girls ask guys, most of the time they're looking for looks as well as dates. That's also true. I mean, women look at looks for dates as well. So I think they're going to say yes to like, hey, Billy's pretty good looking over there. I sure hope he buys a ticket to be with me. So I mean, you got to look at both angles, I think.
Right. And to be fair, I might be a little biased in this case because I never went to prom and I signed up for a date auction and I somehow ended up owing a girl $50,000 when she won me in the auction. I don't know how that works, but apparently it was just that not fun.
And that's why we've started a Patreon campaign for Sean.
Indeed. All right, does anybody else have anything to add before we move on?
I think the only thing that I'd finally like to throw in is that maybe it's me just not understanding the American prom culture, and I blame America heavily because now English schools have started calling it a prom, whereas we used to have leavers balls and what have you. But I thought the whole reason that you don't have necessarily have pre-arranged dates to go to the prom. You go there to hook up with people. You don't already have like a pre-assigned hookup. You go there to try and hook up with as many people as possible. Maybe that's just my own British way of thinking, but there you go.
That sounds incredibly British.
Yeah, that sounds awful. Just awful.
Yeah, it sounds like no fun. Like most of the people will be sitting next to the wall that I went to school with. So,
you don't know my school.
Me included, but except that the one time I did go to prom, I actually did have a date. So amazing, right? Anyway, should we go on to Fox and Friends?
Absolutely.
All right. And thank you guys for picking up the slack when I had my unfortunate computer issues. I appreciate that.
I was singing when you had your technical difficulties.
Oh, I'm so sorry to our viewers for you having to endure that. I'm sorry, guys. I will never leave you again. All right. Go on to Fox and Friends. Now, an editor with the Scientific American magazine by the name of Michael Moyer was invited on Fox and Friends to talk about tech trends for the near future. Now, he picked a variety of things to talk about, but number one on his list was something that made Fox News just a little bit uncomfortable. Moyer told Raw Story that the only interesting thing the scientific community is sure will happen in the next 50 years is that climate change is going to get worse, and that we're going to have to deal with the impacts. So he put that as one of his talking points. In fact, he put it as number one. So what happened next? A Fox producer came back and very politely, but matter-of-factly told told Moyer that he would have to replace the climate change item. Moyer still decided to do the appearance, but instead talked about alien planets, a very interesting subject to me, even to Brian Kilmeade, who joked about the planet possibly having football. Now, Fox News is, of course, angry that Moyer later on tweeted about his experience, and they had this to say. Let me load up the video for you. Doing it live.
Do you remember that guy? He was on our show yesterday around this time. His name is Michael Moyer. He is one of the guys, a writer over at Scientific American. We had him on yesterday to talk about futuristic trends, and he talked about gizmos in the future that will make
diseases, stuff with chromosomes.
Yeah, you know what? And it was an interesting segment. And yeah,
I thought we had a nice chat before the segment aired, you know, during the commercial break and afterward and all that. But apparently, he didn't quite see it that way, because as soon as he left the couch, Kirby Couch, he gets out of the building and he starts saying things like this on Twitter. Went on Fox and Friends this morning, kind of feel like I should take a shower.
Okay, so that was...
I believe you could take that as a negative.
Yeah.
Right? I
Indeed.
think that's pretty much a hit.
So anyway, that seemed weird to us, but then he kept tweeting.
The bone that he had to pick with Fox, he said, was that he wanted to come on here and talk all about climate change. Well, our producers decide what we air,
we
right?
Talk about climate change all the time.
We talk about it all the time, and the things he talked about were actually quite interesting, right? Robots driving your cars in the future, replacing unhealthy genes with healthy genes so that you can cure diseases, things that actually matter.
And we know that someday the Earth will be so hot, only robots will survive.
Okay,
so we don't want to bring it up.
Of course, we care about all of it, and climate change.
Anyway.
So, yeah, of course we care about climate change when we go through and make fun of it all the time. So, what do you guys think about this clip?
I want to jump in because I think I have the contrary opinion to everybody here. I think what Moyer did was kind of classless. Like, if you go on Fox and Friends, right? And it's a fluff segment. It's an early morning show. Like, we all know how the news works in general. That's a fluff segment. And they ask you not to talk about climate change, and then you do the segment without mentioning climate change when you really, really want to. Like, he could have thrown it in there anyway. Like, there's no rule that says that if the producers tell you not to mention something, that you absolutely can't mention it. So if you go and have a fake nice time not mentioning climate change, but then you feel the need to cut people on Twitter later, I think you're a punk, and I think Moyer I think Moyer was a punk in this situation. Like, if you really wanted to make a statement about climate change so badly, you're on live television. You say, "Oh, your producers didn't want me to talk about this, but I'm gonna do it anyway," right? And make them cut you off if you want to make a statement. I think Moyer is kind of a little punk. He did the fluff segment, and then he wanted to cut Fox and Friends later, so he's having his cake and eating it too, and I don't like that. And appreciate that, even if it is Fox and Friends, which everybody on this show hates.
Yeah, I think he should have done both, and if I were in his position, I would have started talking about climate change if I were live on air anyway. But first of all, who says gizmos anymore? That's just a weird word to throw out there, I think. And also the fact they're saying, you know, we were talking about cool stuff, and first of all they're saying, oh yeah, we talk blocks, but you talk about it in an incorrect manner and often in a lying and false manner, so talking about it isn't necessarily your strongest suit. And then I'm saying, yeah, we talk about it, but he talked about all these other cool stuff, and basically they were saying to their audience, who we all know is mainly over the age of at least 65, or 68 I think is the case with Fox, look at the shiny, look at all the cool, like, fun, interesting things. Don't worry about the nasty climate change that's going to wipe out all of humanity in the foreseeable future. No, just look at the cool, interesting things. It was just, they were just trying to distract people away from it, which I think was awful. And then Kilmeade at the end with his just little stupid, petty comments. I really do put Kilmeade up as one of the worst hosts on cable news network at the moment. He's an incredibly stupid man.
Well, Stephen, I just want to say that, of course, they're going to put out, you know, sort of the shiny stuff, and not really talk about how climate change is going to, you know, eventually decimate a lot of our things, you know, and I mean, the Fox News audience isn't going to be alive by the time that happens anyway. So,
no, I want to like I want to go further with that. Like, you guys are right. They brought up all the stuff he talked about for a reason, but it wasn't something. It was, I think, maybe a little more. I don't know if sinister is the word, but it was more well calculated than shiny distraction. It was, hey, look at this reputable scientist we had come on our show and talk about science. We're not anti-science. We had all this stuff. We talked about this with this guy who's well known in the scientific community, and he's the editor of Scientific American. That's why they wanted him to come on the show and talk about these things, and that's why they brought that up. To Sean's point, again here, like I want to reserve judgment, until I know all the facts. Like, I don't know how soon the producers came and told him, you don't get to talk about climate change. You get the impression it happened like
about a day
right before. Oh, about a day in advance.
No,
okay.
it was about a day in advance.
Okay, if he had a day in advance, I'm more inclined to agree with Sean and Steven. Like, he had a chance to plan this out. If it had happened right before the show and he was a little flustered, like I would be more inclined to like give him a pass on it. But at the same time, although I don't think it was a great professional courtesy. One, you got to keep in mind, like to my earlier point, he's the editor. He's an editor of Scientific American. Like, there are other things besides climate change he wants to talk about. So if he would have just come out at the beginning of the segment, gone climate change, and got cut off, then there's other things that serve the purpose of him being there that never would have gotten discussed. So he did have there's a conflict of interest there. There were other things he wanted to talk about, and apparently he got to.
That's sort of the reason that he decided to still do it, even though he couldn't do climate change. That's
right.
Why he wrote a blog post afterwards and saying, "Look, I still wanted to go on. I still wanted to talk about these cool things because I am a scientist, or I'm a scientific editor, and I love science, and I love, talking about these things. So yeah, I took the chance to go on, to go on Fox and Friends, and he also said that I didn't want to just. I wanted to try, even though I knew that I was going to get shut down anyway. I didn't want to self-censor myself before going on. I wanted to at least try, and it was everything that I figured that it was going to be.
But that's why, in my opinion, he's kind of punked out in this situation, because if he really wanted to talk about climate change and he had a day to decide whether or not he wanted to be on the show, he could have not went on the show. But what he did was he went on the show, got his name out there, got to talk about the future technology, and what was a fluff segment. Like, it wasn't like it was like we've seen. If you watch any of those old segments about the technology of tomorrow from like 20 years back, when we're going to have all flying cars and stuff, like those ridiculous segments, like they're meant to be fluff segments that aren't going to be super accurate. So he did the fluff segment, got to promote whatever he was promoting. And then after the fact, he goes and he cuts people, and he even cut people in the makeup room, like for no reason. Like he started tweeting, "Oh, this woman's dumb. She thinks that the plane is missing in a military base." Like, just dude, like if you don't want to go on the show, then tweet that beforehand. Oh, they're not going to let me talk about this. Like that's why I don't agree with them. I don't think even Fox and Friends people, even Kill Me, deserves a little bit better than that.
No, Kill Me doesn't deserve anything.
Yeah, the hosts don't deserve better, but I didn't realize, Sean, you actually kind of won me over. God, I hope I never have to say that again. But yeah, if he's like coming after the makeup artist or whatever, like that is too much. And what apparently she said she believed is an asinine thing to say, but you don't like call out, some person who's not necessarily in an educated position, like you say.
No, yes, you do. You do call out stupidity and idiotic thinking. That is, I think, is everyone's reasonable and kind of rational thing. If you see someone doing or saying something stupid, you call them out on it. I don't care who they are, whether it's the president or a bloody makeup woman. You say that they're saying something stupid.
Okay, well then say it to the makeup woman. Don't put this woman's business out on the tweeter. Like she doesn't know that you're going to be quoting her for the whole world to see.
And I hope she gets mocked for it. Really? I hope she gets mocked for her stupid ideas, because it's a stupid idea, and I hope Fox gets mocked for its stupid ideas.
Well, I
think it was more of, guys, I think this was more not quite attacking the makeup girl, at least not like, I think this was more to indicate or to show the bubble that the Fox News studio kind of lives in. This kind of sort of hostile, ignorant bubble that the entire Fox studio and everybody in it gets stuck in. I think that was his purpose.
That's with all due respect, that's like complete nonsense. Makeup artists are artists, so they're in the little arty bubble, and I'm sure like they work from studio to studio or whatever. Like he was just cutting people unnecessarily. What I think happened is he did a fluff segment, right? And then he got a little bit of hate because he went on Fox by his peers in the scientific community. So then he goes completely over the top and starts attacking people randomly. Like, if you're so disgusted by Fox and Friends, like, let's keep it real. You did not discover that in your segment on Fox and Friends when you're yucking it up. You knew that beforehand that's who these people are. Like, when Jon Stewart goes on Fox shows, Jon Stewart is still Jon Stewart. He doesn't kowtow to O'Reilly or kowtow to anybody. Like, if you want to make a stand on air, make a stand on air. But he wanted to do both. He wanted to be fun. He wanted to have people look at whatever he was promoting and be the cool guy. And then he wanted to cut them up later. And that's what I don't respect about him.
All right, so I think we're sort of tied on this because both Steven and I are both agreeing on this whole stupidity thing, and we think that, you know what, Fox doesn't deserve any credit. And this guy, yeah, it may have been a dick move, but you know what, it couldn't have happened to more deserving people.
Totally, and that's kind of where I wanted to go with it. Like I mean, I'm not all the way over on Sean's side because I do want to point out this guy did burn this bridge. Like, he's not coming back on Fox and Friends, so it wasn't like completely cowardly, but it still was, I think, entirely unprofessional. And so, like to that point, I'm with Sean, but I still think, you know, like, I'm not going to say that he's a punk or whatever. I think he's kind of a jerk, and maybe he should be. But the other thing, like, I'm not trying to gang up on this guy. I do want to point out, too, the absurdity of what the Fox and Friends folks said, where she was like, you know, we don't decide what goes on the show. Our producers do. That's a nonsensical argument because your producers are part of the show. He didn't call out the host by name. He called out the show. And her response is, no, it's not us, it's the show. That shows you how, like, just, like, illogical they are.
I think that speaks to the view that the producers have of the hosts of that show, because we all know that Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity, they're the heavy hand in what goes on in their show. But the producers of this Fox show in the morning, they don't trust people like Kilby. Like, he's an idiot. He doesn't know what needs to go on. We need to tell him what to do. That was the case here.
Do we have football on alien planets?
But that's what I'm saying. It was a joke segment. The thing that I like, the
whole show is a joke segment.
I know, but the thing that I like is and I invite anybody to do this. Go look up after the show, Jesse Ventura, Fox and Friends, Jesse Ventura, Bill O'Reilly. Go watch how you deal with people who don't agree with you when you're on their own show. Jesse Ventura drops the fucking people's elbow on all of these people over torture and secret arrest and all that without any cause, and he's not afraid. And they invited him back because they wanted him for ratings. So be confrontational on air. Don't I hate if Jesse Ventura was tweeting later, like, I would say the same thing about him. But be confrontational on air is my thing.
Yeah, the New Scientist editor, if he probably knew that he was never gonna. He probably didn't want to go back on Fox and Friends again, and so he was gonna burn that bridge. My only wish was that he, started throwing verbal Molotovs, and he really properly burnt that bridge down when he went on air. I think that's really the only kind of thing that I'm annoyed with him at, is that he should have really gone at them much harder when he was live on air.
Now that I can totally agree with, Steven. I'm on your side on this one. He should have dropped the hammer. He should have got out the blowtorch and said, "You want to burn this bridge? Let's burn it down. Let's do this thing." So that's sort of my final point on this one. Are you guys ready to go on to Crazy Uncle Pat?
Let's go to Crazy Uncle Pat, man.
Oh, good. Lots of fun. Lots of fun. Now, Pat Robertson recently talked about the idea of fighting climate change in response to some of the newest reports from the IPCC about the impact of climate change and the idea that we can use policies to fight it. Now, some of those policies would include, of course, cutting emissions and switching over to alternative fuels. Now, the IPCC and 97% of climate scientists say that we must do something and we must do it soon. However, Pat Robertson disagrees and believes that, no, we shouldn't do anything about it, and watch him explain why.
It's a body blow to American industry, and it's a body blow that's a socialist agenda. It's part of the playbook of Obama's mentor, and this is the way that they want to destroy America. It's not something that's set up to really curb global warming. How can you curb emissions when the Chinese are pouring more and more? About what do they say, about one a week a new coal plant comes online in either China or India. They're taking the coal from America, putting it in their plants and pumping it into the atmosphere. Well, we live in one globe, and so the United States cuts back on its energy, and it causes the middle class to have to pay more for electricity. What have we accomplished? All we've done is weaken our country. And that makes no sense at all. But it is high on the agenda of the radicals who want to destroy America. It isn't high on the agenda of those who really care about what goes on in life.
Thoughts?
Let's let Sean go first, because I know he's going to say some absolutely crazy stuff. Stephen, if you don't,
go for it, Sean.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is like kind of a pattern of today's show of me jumping in first on every segment. So I apologize for being so talkative. No, I don't. Yeah, so Pat Robinson's statement. Pat Robinson is a crazy person. Let me just point that out there. And his global conspiracy, crazy person stuff. But one of the things that we were talking about before the show is that he's kind of technically right on a certain aspect of this. If the United States of America stopped using coal tomorrow, and we do burn coal cleaner than other countries because we're a richer country and we care more about pollution and all that. But if the United States stopped burning coal tomorrow, then we would essentially cut the global demand for coal to a very, very low amount without changing the supply. Then coal would become the cheapest source of energy, and that coal would be moved over to Chinese and Indian plants and burned in dirtier conditions. Like that part of it, he's true. The fact that this might be a crazy conspiracy or all this nonsense is the nonsense part of it, but that is technically true, is that you're moving coal from cleaner plants to dirtier plants. That being said, we actually have cut coal consumption and we have cut emissions in this country by the growth of the natural gas industry. So, like, alternatives are better than banning and restricting, especially if nobody else is going to ban and restrict. So if he made that point, Pat Robertson would have been 100% right. Until he reaches that point, he's at about 36%, and that's my fair to Pat Robertson point. Attack me now, guys.
Well, first of all, like, coal, and it's currently using, it's using well over 1.3 billion tons. I've only just quickly looked for recent statistics, but he's saying that stopping using coal in power plants in America will somehow destroy America. It's going to hurt the middle class. Admittedly, it might have a very short-term impact, but if you stop using coal, then you have to replace it with something else, and that something else is going to be renewable energy. You invest in renewable technology, you create jobs, you save the planet. China can't use coal forever. It's in the long run, it's going to make America a stronger country to be better positioned for the future economically and energy-wise as well. So his whole arguments, kind of the radicals, just those catchwords of socialist and you summed up. He's a crazy person. No one should be paying any attention to his views on absolutely anything. I don't know why people even watch his channel, apart from people like us who watch it just to mock him.
Yeah, excellent.
I don't know if Pat Robertson knows this, but we have this thing called the sun. And we can get energy from it if we just maybe do a little investment into it. I don't know. Look, his argument sort of breaks down to It's socialism, and it's going to destroy America if we don't burn all of our coal. Okay, so in Pat Robertson world, if we don't burn up all the coal here and pollute the world, then someone else is going to do it, so that makes it so that it's okay. So it kind of breaks down to we're having a contest of who can fuck up the world first. And currently, I mean, right now, we're not number one. China is actually number one in emissions. They have more emissions than we are, but we're in a very close second. And so if you want to talk about China, let's talk about China. Did you know that China actually subsidizes solar energy far more than America does? Like, that's something that a lot of people don't know. And that's why, and so since China subsidizes their solar energy so much, it's actually a lot cheaper. And so that's kind of why you hear idiot right-wingers claim that, oh my God, solar energy is it's failing in America. It's all this stuff. It's not going to work. Look at Solyndra. Well, no, they actually haven't failed. It's just most of those companies under the DOE loan program actually did make money, but because we don't subsidize it just as much as China, we're not making that much money off of it as much, and so it's not as economical for the businesses to do it. They're not going to make as much of a profit because the government isn't subsidizing it. The Germans are heavily subsidizing, the Chinese are heavily subsidizing, and we're just not.
Yeah, I gotta call kind of nonsense on that. Yeah, the companies are being sustained by the subsidies. That's true, but solar energy is 0.3% of the energy in the world. Like 0.3.
It could be much, much more.
That's 1/3 of 1% with billions of dollars from the Chinese. Billions of dollars.
Sean, I've heard enough. I gotta cut Sean off here. Okay, because he's made one argument that at least follows logically in a world where you get to create the data around the argument. Then Pat Roberts made an argument that doesn't follow logically. And then Sean just jumped in with another one. So the reason why we should keep burning coal is because we're burning coal. Solar doesn't make up that much of the energy in the world, therefore we shouldn't use solar. No, that's an idiotic argument, man. That's the whole reason to get off coal, because we have these renewable resources that are getting more and more efficient and working better and better and better. That's why we need to invest in them, so that they make more of the energy. They don't do it well. Like, the fact that we're doing a horrible thing is not a reason to continue doing a horrible thing. Now, so I'm sorry I had to play bust nuts with you there, Sean. Now I want to be a little more tactful in how I bust you on this one here. So, as usual with a libertarian argument, you have a position based on a principle, on an a priori assumption about the way the way that things work, and in this world where your theories are what's going on. And hey, within the laws that you've got established, you made a sound argument. Like, if we stop using coal, then there's less competition to buy up that coal. China's going to get it at a better price. Here's why that argument breaks down, and then I'll go on to Pat's, because it's the least substantive of the argument so far, even though it's the one that we're quote unquote covering. One, we don't know how much coal China is burning for energy. We know how much coal China consumes. We know how much they import and how much they produce, and we'll get into that later. But we don't know how much of what China uses for their coal is going into powering energy, and how much of it is going into steel production, because China is also a huge steel producer, and a lot of it may be going into that. And hey, that's still a carbon-intensive process. I don't want to belittle that, but that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is burning coal for energy. Now, the reason why Sean's argument, which makes sense when you hear it, but completely falls apart in light of data, falls apart, is because China, they burn a ton of coal. They're also the world's largest producer of coal, but not even in the top 5 of exporters of coal. They burn a ton of coal that they're making themselves. So what everybody else does with coal is not going to affect their price of coal that much. Now, I do want to be fair. They are also the largest importer of coal, just because the sheer mass of what they burn is, they're so big. But the amount they import versus the amount they produce themselves is doesn't even compare. They China, let's see, let me get their production numbers here.
It's 46% of the world's total production of coal.
They produce 3.5 billion tons and import 177 million. That puts them at #1 in production and and importing, but you can see just because they're number one in both, there's a huge disparity in how much they produce and burn in their country versus how much they import. So it's so there's that. And like Jeff said, you know, like they're moving towards solar too. They are burning a ton of coal because they've got this huge population. They don't have the infrastructure, you know, to support as it becomes a more wealthy population. And coal is the quick fix in the middle because it's the one that's easiest to deploy. But they're looking to deploy the other ones. And if just in closing, I want to actually address Pat Robertson's issue and why it's so stupid. And some liberals might get mad about this. You know, here since 2008, we've had a lot of G whatever number, you know, you want to call climate meetings where the world, you know, or Kyoto protocols and stuff like that, where the world was going to get together and we were going to hammer out this climate change thing together, and we were going to pass resolutions and all honor them, and everything was going to be great going forward. And of course, nothing's come from any of them. And here, where liberals might get mad is like, it's not the Koch brothers sabotaging those, because they don't have to. Well, I guess they are by proxy because they're the ones pushing the coal industry. But the reason why those meetings haven't gone anywhere is not because the big Western countries are fighting each other. It's because India and China are coming to those meetings and saying, hey, you guys are trying to impose really strict CO2 regulations. You guys developed and modernized without those. Why should we have to have those in place? And so what Pat Robertson is saying is we should continue to make that argument valid and continue to burn coal ourselves and to be complete hypocrites and tell China and India they need to clean their act up without cleaning it up ourselves. And that's a ridiculous, idiotic point.
Okay, so I want to make 2 points. One, I never made the argument that we should burn all our coal so the Chinese don't. And two, the idea that because China produces its own coal, that doesn't affect the global coal market, that's like the ridiculous energy independence.
It doesn't affect the price that China buys it at because all the government has to do is nationalize that industry, which China has a history of doing.
Yeah,
and they can set the price at whatever they damn well please.
But even if the United States was 100% energy independent, it wouldn't really change the price of oil that much because it's on a global market. So, and also I want to point out that one thing that you were right about them importing coal, and we don't know how much they're burning. There's actually like piles and piles of like coal just stacked up across China because they're importing like not to a market demand. They're just importing to import. But to get to the point, look, if the United States completely cuts off their coal consumption right now, like artificially cuts it off by the government, not by natural gas passing it or nuclear advancement or solar advancement or whatever, no wind advancement because that's impossible. But if they stopped, then you're going to drive down the price of coal, and other countries are going to consume that coal while it's cheap in the short term.
You
right?
just argued the exact opposite, though.
I understand.
Us getting out of oil won't affect the price of oil because it's traded globally. But coal, if we get out of that, then coal
I said the myth of energy independence was what you were saying, that China produces so much coal that they're close to coal independence. Energy independence is irrelevant. But if you artificially cut off half, because I think
that was not the argument I made, man. Your
whatever.
Argument is different.
This is Sean time. Then that won't affect. So my point is that Pat Robertson was slightly right about that point. That was it. I wasn't advocating for him and all that. And secondly, if the Chinese want to subsidize solar companies, they totally can. They can go for it. We'll reap the benefits. I got news for you. You don't benefit from your government subsidizing an industry. That industry benefits.
Yes, you do. You can benefit tons by a government subsidizing your industry. Case in point, the oil companies. Back when they needed to be started up, they had huge subsidies, and look at where they are now. And like the point that I was going to raise is that no one is making the argument. Robertson think is what people are saying, that we should just stop using coal tomorrow, just turn off all the coal plants immediately. No, of course not. That'd be ridiculous. Just over a 5-year period, 10-year period, 20-year period, you slowly wean off those companies and you invest in solar power, you invest in nuclear power. No one's saying just completely cut off the flow of coal energy. That would be a ludicrous argument to make. You've got to slowly wean it off.
Liberals don't like nuclear power.
I just want to finish what I was talking about China too. We see a lot of the effect of China burning that coal, and maybe this is why they're subsidizing, or at least one of the reasons that they're subsidizing solar energy so much, is because stuff like, for example, a recent report in The Guardian states that half of all Chinese groundwater sources are polluted. Beijing has an air toxicity twice the limit deemed safe. Okay, this is what people like Pat Robertson and the other right-wing drill baby drill, let's burn all the coal Neanderthals want to turn America into. That's essentially what they're advocating for. Let's burn all the coal before everybody else does, and we're turned into China. That's sort of what's going to happen. You're going to get all of this pollution. I remember reading about things where, with unregulated industry, being able to light our rivers on fire, and that's sort of where we're going back to. And it's even going to get worse because of China and India both burning all this coal, plus America still being the second largest polluter in the world, with only a quarter of the population of the world, or do we do a quarter of the energy usage? I'm not sure. But
it's 5% that uses 25% of the energy, or something like that.
Yeah, and we put out the second most emissions. That's pretty fucked up, man. And all of this is so that, Pat's right-wing friends in the energy sector can make an extra couple of bucks. Fuck that.
I just want to point out that coal could power Pat Robertson's diamond mines for decades.
I thought about going there. I'm glad you did. I was wondering if maybe Pat doesn't have some secret coal mines now that his diamond mines have been exposed.
Hey, that's a good theory.
But hey, to get back on topic, I don't have the context of the whole clip. Like, he's talking about President Obama's mentor. Is he talking Bill Ayers? Like, who is he even saying there?
I don't know.
I'm gonna guess
Bill
Saul
Ayers.
Alinsky. That's
Saul
the
Alinsky,
favorite.
something like that.
Okay, because I was thinking he was going for Bill Ayers and the whole I was like because Bill Ayers has since come out and declared Obama to be a war criminal who should be tried. So I was like, I don't.
It's just the fact that he's all like, it's a socialist plot for Obama to destroy America by not burning coal.
Yeah, how does replacing a for-profit coal industry with a for-profit renewable industry, how is that socialism? I don't understand. But it's just flat out like, at least Sean's point was based on like facts that don't exist but made sense. Pat Roberts is being Pat Roberts, man.
Indeed.
Pat Robertson, I should say. I'm sorry.
All right. Do you guys want to move on to the NRA story, or move on to Crossfire?
Crossfire.
Oh,
let's go to Crossfire and continue our climate change segment here. I promise you guys, this is the last one. I got another video. Bill Nye the Science Guy continues to step up his appearances and speak out on behalf of the science community. Now, this time going on Crossfire to not argue about the existence of climate change, but to point out something we on TYT Community have been saying for a while now. So, if you want to see what he's saying, just watch.
Even if what Van and the White House are saying is all true, the scare tactics have not worked. Check
let me
out.
ask you before you go on.
Well,
You're
no, let
saying
me
it's
finish
not
my
true.
question.
Let's talk about the facts. You're saying that
No, let me
true.
finish my question, Bill. I want you to take a look at this polling. Only about 36% of Americans think global warming is a serious threat to our way of life. Now, again, let me pause it. Everything that Van and the White House have said is true. However, the scare tactics have not worked, and don't you need public consensus to move the needle on this?
So how do you want to get public consensus? By saying that it's not happening, that it's not serious, that shorelines aren't flooding? So
Tell
I
us
think
how to use the science to actually change public consensus.
Well, you get the message out. This is serious business. And you remember Hurricane Sandy? The bottom half of Manhattan was flooded.
Yeah.
The economic effect of that alone is enormous, let alone the rebuilding infrastructure and so on. And we're in the developed world where people can get on the highway and drive. You know, when you say moving a highway 4 feet, it doesn't sound like very much, but you're talking about millions of tons of road that have to be lifted. and that energy has to come from somewhere, and that's just the start of things.
And
And so when we start having crop failures and the drought that's in California continues, the economic costs...
Yeah, well, you can look at these things, and you can look at the climate realities, and even this NCA report says that the trend on tornadoes is uncertain. The IPCC report says that the trend on hurricanes is uncertain. We're in the longest hurricane drought. I'm not a denier. I'm not a skeptic. What I'm saying is the climate is changing. Yes, man-made emissions are in some part to that, but we haven't seen these extreme weather event trends. The observed data doesn't prove that.
Well, so I
More
disagree.
importantly is the policy prescriptions, these greenhouse gas regulations coming down, prohibiting building new coal-fired power plants is just going to make us less equipped, less economically prosperous to handle these problems, whether they're more frequent and more
So
intense
let's
or
just
not.
start with we don't agree on the facts, right? So this third report came out saying it's very serious. You say no, right? There's the essence of the problem, S.E.
Well,
the science, the researchers say yes. You
Not all the
hoping
researchers, and
against
again,
hope.
even the IPCC says that there's no frequency or intensity when it comes to hurricanes.
Okay, hurricane, schmurricane, if I may.
This one
The sea
says
is
about
getting
tornadoes.
bigger.
That's the same thing.
The
Yeah, sea
ocean
level is
gets
rising,
bigger.
although it's retracted. It's increasing at a slower rate over the past few years. We've had Arctic
I
ice
think you're
globally
cherry-picking
increasing.
data. I think
No, not absolutely.
Why did this report come out?
But Bill, isn't it a problem when science guys attempt to bully other people? I mean, Nick here had to say, I'm not a denier. He had to get it up. I'm not a denier, because really the science group has tried to shame anyone who dares question this, and the point I'm trying to make is it's not working with the public.
Okay, so what I want to point out is when he said we don't agree on the facts, and I think right there is, I mean, that's really I think the issue. But I also want to talk about the bullying comments made by host S.E. Cup. But before I do that, we're going to go to Jordan and ask what you think about this. Go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah, hey, Mom, if you're watching this, go ahead and turn it off for a little bit. So I want to, like, there's so much I want to say, and I'm sure you guys are going to bring up a lot of things, so I just want to make a real quick statement or two here and then let you guys take over, and if we can circle back, I'll say anything else that didn't get brought up that I wanted to say. First and foremost, I live, the place where we live has been completely decimated by tornadoes twice in 3 years now. And that has been attributed to, global weirding or whatever you want to call it. That's a result of climate change. With all due respect to our listeners who get offended at language, that guy can go fuck himself. I'm tired of people like him getting on national television and distracting people from the issues, and it loses lives, it loses property, it loses people's livelihood, and I'm fucking sick of it. So that said, on a less personal note, that same jackass it's like typical like right-wing projection to a T, and they're sometimes they're savvy about it, but here like he did it in the same breath. So his whole point was scientists are drawing conclusions based on correlation without necessarily having a causation, and bullying people into following those conclusions. And then in the same breath, he turned around and did that. So what the report says is that we don't know for certain that every one of these increases in tornadoes can be attributed to climate change, and we don't know, and even though we do know that there does seem to be an increase from it, we don't necessarily know that it's going to increase at the same projections that some people have said. So what the report did not say was, the report did not say that climate change was not driving a lot of these catastrophic events. The report clearly does say that. It just says we don't know if it's driving it quite as much as the correlation necessarily implies. So let's be, kind of open about that and explore that further. What he took the report saying that to mean was, since it doesn't say exactly that, it's actually saying not this. So he did exactly what he accused Bill Nye of doing while he was doing it, and it just it drives me insane that like not only that Bill Nye didn't call him out for that, but in a segment where Bill Nye didn't call him out for that and would have been in his rights to call him out for that, is accused of bullying whenever he is clearly exercising restraint in that exact same segment. Because I mean, you saw what I did to Sean earlier. And what Sean said was nowhere near as dumb as what that guy said. Like, God, I can't imagine how hard it's got to be for people like Bill Nye to keep their composure on these shows.
Well, the thing is, Bill Nye, he's not a climatologist. Kind of climate change and climate science isn't his specialist area, and it's so frustrating for me in that all of the kind of network shows across America, they always try to bring on Bill Nye to debate kind of science in general. And they always bring him on for climate change. He's not a climatologist. Get an actual climatologist on. I'm not, disregarding Bill Nye. He speaks very well for the scientific community, but get a real climatologist on to speak about these things. And S.E. Cupp, I mean, sometimes I just want to pimp slap the glasses off her face. She's such an infuriating woman to watch. She's saying, the scientific community, you're bullying people. You're saying, look how dangerous it is and stuff. Well, as Bill and I said, what do you expect the scientific community to say when you've got increase in tornadoes, you've got increase in other global catastrophes that have been attributed to global warming and climate change? It's just, what do these people expect? They're saying, oh, your messaging isn't very well. It's because the fucking media doesn't do its job in reporting it accurately or fairly. It's so frustrating. And then finally, that economist who is arguing the conservative position, I mean, why they have an economist on, I mean, maybe it's for a different segment they were talking about, but he has no right to be talking about climate science and what scientists should or shouldn't be doing. He has no clue whatsoever. And he was, as Jordan said, he was making all the typical conservative talking points, saying, oh, well, I do believe in climate change a bit, but, it's not that bad and it's not really that serious. Yes, it is. It's going to destroy... I mean, people always say, oh, kind of climate change is going to end the world. It's not going to end the world. The world's going to be perfectly fine. It's humanity that's going to die off if we don't sort this shit out. And
like the George Carlin quote, like the world will be just fine. It's just we're fucked.
Yeah, exactly. And so the entire segment there infuriates me. One, for having Bill Nye on to talk about climate change. Get someone else on who really does know their shit about climate change. And again, I'm not kind of dissing on Bill Nye at all. S.E. Cupp for talking about bullying and stuff when she just has no idea what she's talking about. And then the conservative economist who, again, has no idea what he's talking about. Crossfire is a show for people who, by and large, don't know what they're talking about.
Okay, so I want to jump in before I have horrible technical difficulties again, and point out that I think bullying is becoming one of those words to me where you just lose the argument when you go to it, because it's such a buzzword. It seems like people just throw it out there to be like, you're disgusting and I don't want to hear your opinion anymore. So I really, really, really I'm starting to despise that word. So I just want to, SC Cup I have no interest in. As far as the structure of the show, them having a conservative economist on, we don't know if they were all doing different segments or what the structure of that and why that was apparent. But if they were going to argue if they weren't arguing the science, if it wasn't an economist arguing with Bill Nye, who isn't a climatologist but he is a scientist, if they were going to argue that Norwegian guy Bjorn Njork or whatever, the author of Cool It, the skeptical environmentalist, if they were going to have that guy who's an economist and does climate work, argue about whether a certain solution, the results would be economical compared to the cost and all that, the climate gains would compare to the economic cost, they're going to have an argument like that, then that would be totally different. But it's weird that you're having an economist argue science, and you're getting Bill Nye, who's not a climatologist, kind of arguing how it would be better if we had all these green new jobs, but he's not an economist. So it's like you're asking two people to argue over things that they don't know what they're talking about, and it's to create confusion is what I feel like the point of it is. Because
it's sort of that false equivalence.
Right. And I'm not saying Bill Nye is and I'm not saying Bill Nye.
I know that, but what they're doing, in a way, by bringing on Bill Nye and an economist, is that they're creating a false equivalence, and they're also muddying the waters.
No. Hey, I'm actually going to defend, because as much as I like CNN is in the tank, and this is another rant I wanted to go on, but obviously, the tornadoes and stuff are kind of personal for me right now, so that's what I wanted to focus on. The reason why 36% of Americans or whatever is all that believe that this is a major issue is one, because the most watched news network in America, its agenda 3 out of every 4 years is to deny climate change, and then 1 year they spend to get a Republican elected, and then they go back to 3 years of denying climate change. And CNN, which is supposed to be the unbiased news network of the big three, spends its time covering a missing jet instead of covering climate change stories that are destroying communities in America that freaking week. That's why people don't think it's that important.
To be fair, I gotta kind of call you out a little bit, Jordan. Like it's not technically correct, and this is what a lot of conservatives attack people on, to link individual storm events and not overall trends to climate change. So
right. But that's what these studies are doing. Yeah, like I'm not pointing to a specific. I kind of have. I do concede that. But the increase in tornado season, like there's no way to know for sure. Like the tornadoes that recently hit our hometown, were caused by climate change. But we do know that the increased number of these events is correlated with climate change, and there's probably causation there. We can't point to a single specific tornado and the path it took and say climate change. You're absolutely right there, and I don't want anybody to think I'm saying that.
The thing is,
I just wanted to point that out for our audience, because we will get commenters.
Sure.
But the thing is, it's the trend, right? And it's not. And the Economist, what he was trying to do is he was trying to say, oh, well, technically they might not be increasing, and that's the frequency of the storms may not be increasing. But the trend is not only in the number of storms that keep occurring, it could also be the severity of the storms. So instead of 10 weak storms, we could have 5 incredibly intense strong storms. So the Economist is smart. I give him credit. He is smart because he's using his intelligence to muddy the waters, which is his goal. I'm not saying he's right.
But he went too far, because he said we can't draw a conclusion from this data. Therefore, he drew a conclusion from the data.
Yeah, but nobody's checking your facts. So, like I said, he's smart in his arguing tactics, but he's not. I don't think he's right. Now I cut Stephen off, so go ahead.
He was making an argument. The Economist, an argument from ignorance. He was just creating that fallacy as an argumental technique. Whether he knew he was doing it or not is another case. But going back to Jordan's point about, CNN, they've been covering this missing plane now for, nearly 2 months has been missing and still haven't found any wreckage. If CNN had been forced to talk about the tornadoes for even a week, if they had to do a week's solid coverage on the tornadoes, they would start speculating. They'd be forced to, was this maybe climate change or not? They would be forced to talk about the issue. And whether they'd be right in speculating or not, that's another debate. But the fact is, they just do not talk about the issue at all. They don't give it any coverage. And when the tornadoes did happen, there is an event, like there's a recent, early today, there was a quite large earthquake in Mexico. They say, oh yeah, there was an earthquake in Mexico. There was a tornado in kind of Arkansas, or the tornado in Ohio. Lots of devastation. Back to the missing plane. They don't explore anything about it whatsoever. And it's not just CNN. It's not just Fox. It's the entire media. There's only very small pockets of media, and it's certainly not mainstream. Even small pockets of independent media who give climate change the coverage that it deserves.
Well, I want to kind of build on that, Stephen. SE Cup started the segment by saying, "Oh, your fear tactics are failing. Look how few Americans actually believe in this climate change hoax." Well, when you think about it, and I know she didn't say hoax, but that directly is linked to the points that Stephen has been making. It's not the fact that the climate change fear tactics have failed, which, by the way, I find this whole fear tactic thing pretty laughable, because it's actually the truth. And sorry if the truth is kind of scary, the fact that we're doing to the world, but it's the fact that the media is not covering it in a responsible way, if they're covering it at all, and they're having these false equivalence debates, and they're having these people come on and muddy the water. That's why only 36% of Americans actually think that climate change is real, because we are like the media is being incredibly irresponsible in their reporting, and they're confusing the fuck out of regular people who don't have time to sit there and study the reports because they've got jobs, they've got families, they've got kids, they got money problems, they got all of this stuff, and so when you make it confusing, they're like, I don't know, I don't believe it, whatever, I got to get back to work. So does anybody have anything to say about that?
No, I mean, at the end of the day, I'd really like if CNN had, if they decided to dedicate, we're going to have an entire day that's, you know, one big day that's going to be devoted to talking about climate change. Does it exist? Is mankind? They should have 99 scientists sitting on one side of the studio and David Koch sitting on the other, and have a debate that way. And then the people who would tune in, I mean, barely anyone's watching CNN these days anyway when they're not talking about the plane, but they would see, you know, that climate change is a serious thing. The vast majority of scientists and professionals who know what they're talking about say it's a serious thing, and that we need to pay the hell attention to it and sort it out. And also, just, you know, SE Cup saying, you know, scare tactics aren't working. Going back, you know, Bill Nye's point was right. Is that what do you expect the scientists to say? Just go, oh well, you know, it's actually quite scary, but you know, don't worry. They've got to scare people because that's the only. I generally can't think of any other way that scientists can talk about it to get the media even slightly interested, unless they start using clickbait titles such as "Will climate change kill your kittens?" or 56 ways climate change will affect your ice cream consumption. Only if they started going down that path might some media start picking up a tiny bit, but that would be ludicrous if we started going down that path.
Climate change, BuzzFeed edition. There you go.
I wouldn't be surprised if we start going down that route.
Speaking of clickbait, I got a new story for you guys next.
Oh, actually, hold on. We've got the NRA story, and then we're going to go to a story about, well, it involves penises. Presented by Sean, of course, who loves to talk about penis. But first, something sort of related to penis, guns. I know, cheap shot. Hate me later. The NRA is challenging Barack Obama's nomination for Surgeon General. Vivek Murthy, yes, I said that right. Vivek Murthy, a Harvard Medical School physician, was tapped by the Obama administration to take the top medical spot. Now, he waits, like many other Obama nominees, to be confirmed by the Senate that holds only a small majority of Democratic senators, but not enough to overcome a Republican filibuster. Enter the NRA, that has been sending letters to lawmakers and members asking them to block his nomination. Now, why? Why would the NRA care about the Surgeon General's position? They say, quote, Dr. Murthy's record of political activism in support of radical gun control measures raises significant concerns about his ability to objectively examine issues pertinent to America's 100 million firearm owners. In a separate email to NRA members, Dr. Murthy is described as someone who agrees with President Barack Obama's radical anti-gun agenda, and who has advocated on many occasions for the banning of lawfully owned firearms. Panic. Now, the editors of the New England Journal of Medicine said Murthy has stood for, quote, reasonable and mainstream forms of gun regulation, including assault weapons ban, limit on ammunition sales, and required safety training. Murthy has said that, if confirmed, his principal focus would not be gun control, but would actually be preventing obesity in America, which is a huge, huge problem. But they still plan on trying to lobby to block his nomination. So I wanted to get your guys' opinion on this. What do you think? Is this ridiculous that they're trying to block this guy from being the Surgeon General? I mean, it's not like the Surgeon General is an actual general.
Of course it's ridiculous. They're saying, oh, he's, you know, political activist, he's going to kind of somehow espouse his views when he's a Surgeon General. If he had been a Surgeon General who's saying, no, guns are great, we need less regulation, he's been, you know, really activist in that area, do you really think the NRA would be bringing up the same argument? Oh no, like, even though he adheres to our philosophical beliefs, he's still a bit too activist, and so we want someone. Of course not. That would destroy that argument in and of itself. And them saying, oh, he's in favor of radical gun reform. Even, the administration's coming out and saying, oh, he's in favor of, fairly modest reform. And for most people who are in favor of kind of gun control and gun control reform, the administration's reforms are fairly weak source in and of themselves. So he's not a radicalist in any sense. And I don't see how, as a Surgeon General, he can have that much impact on kind of gun controls and gun regulation. He says he's going to focus on obesity, and like, why would he focus on gun control rather than that as a Surgeon General?
Well, to be fair to the NRA, if he was really in favor of getting rid of obesity, he would want people shot full of holes, because if you eat and it all falls out the side of you, you can't get obese. That's just science. Yeah, so now that I've made that ridiculous point, if I was the NRA, I probably wouldn't be opposed to the Surgeon General, but I understand the theory that they're working under, and if it was NASA that we're talking about, then I would actually say it's a good tactic of the NRA if they were opposing somebody who's going to NASA who is in favor of gun control. Because every time the government wants to release a study, for whatever reason, and I know the reason, it's because NASA is the only popular government bureau, they release it through NASA, even if it doesn't make sense. Like, the government wanted to do a study on the filibuster, right? And the Congress studying the filibuster is a gigantic conflict of interest. So, of course, they appropriated that to NASA. So it says NASA, so there's a headline that said, NASA says Americans don't like the filibuster and want it changed. And that actually came out before the filibuster changed. So if it was NASA, I would get why the NRA is opposed to it. But the Surgeon General, I don't see what impact he has on guns, other than saying I'm the Surgeon General and I'm speaking at a Brady campaign or something. Like, to me, it wouldn't be the top of my priority list if I was the NRA, but I'm not the NRA.
Go ahead, Jordan.
All right. So, yeah. So, as the gun owner in the group, of course, my opinion is the only one that actually carries any weight. So I want to make
not true. I also own a weapon that is in terrible condition because it needs to be massively cleaned and derusted, so
what
it
do
will
you
actually
have?
be able to fire a shot.
What do you have?
It is a breech. I believe it's a breech loader musket.
Musket by definition doesn't load from the breech. But
that shows how much I know about firing this particular weapon. Since
muskets
I've only fired it once.
Gotcha. We'll talk after the show. But anyway, okay. So that was a fun little conversation. I'm glad we had that.
Yeah. Well, like I said, my knowledge of this particular weapon is very limited, but it's not the only one.
Clearly,
I've actually shot shotguns and.
So our audience should know Jeff used to work at a firing range.
Yes, I used to work at a firing at a conservation club actually.
So Jeff is in the he's part of the gun lobby. That's take that right-wing conspiracy theorist. But anyway, and hey, I also used to sell firearms for a living. So there you go. We should totally be in the pro-gun camp. So with that background disclosure, I wanted to defend and attack the NRA here because I'm the regressive progressive and that's what I do. This is a little bit crazy that they're coming after a Surgeon General, but the reason why they're doing this is because there actually is a coherent, it may or may not be evil, but there is a coherent line of reasoning here, and it's that for years, for over a decade, the CDC has been banned from studying gun violence almost completely. There's been a few very, very tight loopholes they could get around. More or less, no federal money could go towards CDC research of gun violence. It could not be treated scientifically as a disease or as a health issue even. Disease is too specific of a word. After Sandy Hook, that ban was lifted. And so the Surgeon General at this point does become relevant in the gun violence conversation because for the first time in years, he's allowed to enter into the conversation like every other developed country, like his colleagues in the medical field and researchers in other developed countries that have a much lower gun homicide rate than we do are allowed to. And so this is the NRA So that's me defending them right there. That's as close of a defense as I'm going to get here. Well, actually, I'm going to defend them on one more point. The Journal of the New England Journal of Medicine said that Murthy has stood for reasonable and mainstream forms of gun regulation, including an assault weapons ban, a limit on ammunition sales, and required safety training. Now, again, I'll defend the NRA here, and or not really defend the NRA so much as come after Murthy. That's not a scientific position because there is no data, or there's very little data that shows an assault weapons ban would at all make a dent in gun crime. It would stop some.
And that's also to point out as well. To be fair, that's not necessarily a mainstream position held in America. A lot of people are very, are against these assault weapons bans and limits on magazine size.
Well, to be fair, and I hate to cut Jordan off, but it's because people don't realize, a lot of people don't realize that assault weapon does not equal what your brain thinks it equals. People think assault weapon is a semi-automatic rifle, but in reality an assault weapon involves like what types of customizations you've done to your gun or what kinds of grips and all that. So like you could
which is still stupid because you're making a gun illegal based on how it looks rather than how it functions.
Exactly.
That's just idiotic. But yeah, so there's that. Like, so if I'm the NRA, I say, hey, then you launch a campaign and say, hey, this guy's a scientist who's supporting this position that's, doesn't really fall in line with scientific data. That's how you respond to this if you want to get into this conversation. You don't do it by like bullying this guy who has stated his main goal is to fight the obesity problem, which is a serious problem. So now the NRA is making sure not only do we have a really high mortality rate from gun deaths in America, but we're going to keep dying from being overweight. So that's the end of my defense or attack of Murthy. So now I want to come after the NRA. One, this is just another example of conservatives showing how little they actually believe in free speech. Because Murthy, in situations outside of his office, or in this case, office that he's been appointed but not approved to, has made political speech, and the NRA is saying because he exercised his First Amendment right, he should be banned from this role. BS. That's his First Amendment right. That's what he gets to do. So there's that. And then the other thing here is this is the NRA showing how unsure they are in their own position. If my theory is correct, that the reason why this is relevant is because now the ban on treating gun violence as a health issue has been lifted. I actually read an article on Guns and Ammo the other day that showed that the CDC's first reports on this are at best ambiguous about gun violence and may even start to show that a lot of gun control laws don't help prevent gun violence. So it's looking like the data might actually even enforce their stance, but they're so scared that it might not that they're trying to get out in front of it and stop it. Like they want that data to not exist or not be examined, I should say. And like they're not even willing to risk it, even if it might end up supporting them. They don't care because right now they've got the momentum and they don't want anything to challenge that status quo, and that's what this is about.
I'll kind of come out sort of against that, and I think this is the NRA running out of things to do, running out of things to challenge us, because they've essentially won the gun control debate, and so they're just trying to maintain their power base. But let's go to Stephen.
Yeah, I was kind of going to pick up on that point. I mean, is this not just a case of, unless it was Wayne LaPierre who was running for Surgeon General, they would be opposing almost anyone running for that position, regardless of their gun control, gun control.
Wayne LaPierre was in favor of background checks in the past, so I would oppose him if I was the NRA.
Yeah, and also, like, as Jordan was saying, this Surgeon General has every right to talk about whatever the hell he wants, and it shouldn't kind of bar him from the position of Surgeon General. I'm sure that within his lifetime, in his profession, both him and a lot of his colleagues, who he knows personally, have had to deal with so many gunshot wounds and people who have, maybe died on the operating table with him. And he's probably sick of having to deal with these cases again and again and again. And he knows that if there's less guns in America, then there's going to be less people who are being shot. It's just a simple matter of fact. If you got rid of all the guns in America, then no one would be getting shot. And I know that's a ridiculous argument to make, but it's true. You look at countries like Australia and the UK, where we pretty much got rid of all guns, we have less shootings. it's a really simple argument to make, and the NRA just wants to stop any possible debate whatsoever. Any potential person who has a bit of a platform and a bit of kind of credence given to their position, who may be in favour of gun control, they don't want them to be on that platform because they fear that they may start talking about these things and then that will negatively impact the NRA and their fundraising.
Yeah, totally. And that's to push back against Stephen but stay relevant to the story. One of the things that the journal did say this Murthy was in favor of was safety training. So, like, clearly he's not trying to take your guns from you because he wants you to have safety training. And if you can't have a gun, then you can't have that safety training. But to push back against Stephen's point, there are countries like Switzerland that are not as heavily armed as America, but still very heavily armed, and have homicide and gun violent rates more in line with England's, even though they're more heavily armed. But they also have mandatory safety training and a culture that teaches to respect a weapon, and we don't really have that in America in the name of freedom. And so it's frustrating to see like these supposed gun rights groups come out things that have nothing to do with gun rights.
Yeah, but two things. One, let's not forget that Switzerland isn't full of Americans, and that's probably why they don't have the higher rate of gun crime.
Totally.
And secondly, the NRA, them saying, oh, he's got these radical ideas, and with you saying, he's in favour of, getting some safety training, and I don't think that helps the problem too much in either way. Countries full of idiots either way. But if they want to hear some radical views, they should really just talk to me about what I do as gun control in America, because that would be considered radical.
That is a good point. Sean, what do you got?
I was ready to move. I was ready to move on. Oh, the one thing I will point out is, in my opinion, is I don't think that gun violence is particularly a public health issue as compared to a criminal justice issue, in my opinion. That's just a technical thing. So I would rather the FBI look into gun violence than the CDC per se.
All right. So
I would say, what do we have to lose by approaching it from both angles? But I mean, I understand where Sean's coming from.
Right, that's a good point. I think, why not? What's the harm? What is the NRA afraid of?
I just think that public health should be. I hate public health because that's what they used to ban stuff. But I just think that from a technical issue, it would make more sense for things to go where they belong and not have. I'm just saying. Just saying.
Okay. Anyway, we should probably move on to our last story of the night. A little bit of fluff to end out your night. I'm going to throw it over to Sean, and he's going to talk about penises. Go ahead, Sean.
Finally, I've been waiting to cover this story since forever. Okay,
Sean has been itching to talk about penis all night.
Exactly. Now, please let me finish.
It's been so hard for him to hold back.
Are we really going to do this? Let me get through the intro. A recent Kenyan study has shown that having a big dick does not equal keeping your chick. Now, this survey involved 500 couples and 12 focus groups. The wives were married to fishermen, and each of the fishermen were told to measure their penis, and the results of their penis size was compared to whether or not their wife would remain faithful to them. And the study is shocking. It turns out that the larger your penis is, the more likely your wife is going to cheat on you. Now, there were other factors involved in this story. For instance, high levels of domestic violence led to cheating, denial of preferred sexual positions led to cheating, and general repression by the husband, like you repressing your wife, leads to cheating, according to this study. One of the things that they did not control for, unfortunately, is that these men were all fishermen and therefore smelly, so that also might have led to cheating, but we don't know about that. So I wanted to throw this story over to our panel and ask them what they think about small penises, and also ask them if their girlfriends and wives are faithful to them, because that would indicate a lot about you.
Well, first of all, we all know that Sean's never been cheated on in his life, so the viewers can make their assumptions about that.
That is a fact.
Okay, speak to yourself then. But secondly, getting to the actual study, the men were self-reporting the size, the size of their penis. So any man that's reporting on his own size, they're gonna add at least 2 or 3 inches. At least for the most part. And whilst if you make that assumption, then you'd assume everyone is going to be bragging, so that shouldn't affect the overall statistics too much in terms of kind of people with a larger penis cheating more. I don't think it's necessarily the most scientific study, and honestly, I wouldn't read too much into it.
Yeah, I'm kind of going to go with Steven about this. I mean, this study, I'm just going to have to say this. Can you believe it? Because I sure don't. Now, what was interesting is some of the other controlling factors that they said. That domestic violence has a big role in whether your spouse will cheat on you. Well, no shit. If you beat up your wife, you would expect them to want to get some elsewhere because you're beating your fucking wife, you dumb ass. Some of these controlling factors are no shit, duh. What does it have to do at all with the size of their penis? It makes absolutely no sense. This is one of the most non-scientific, supposedly scientific studies I've probably seen.
I actually want to jump in for one quick second. One of the things this study proved, or which should be obvious, and a lot of people in America don't know this because we don't have very good sex education in this country, is that there are different sizes of vaginas. So sometimes it doesn't really work out to have a big, gigantic jump.
How do you know that?
Science. It was in the study if you guys read the article and did the research. But yeah, I found the story interesting on that level, that there's just information that most Americans don't even think about. Like, female sex organs come in different sizes. Jordan, any thoughts?
Yeah, I would just like to denounce and reject Stephen from a couple segments ago for threatening to slap a woman and say that no one on TYT Community endorses that sort of behavior, which apparently leads to cheating.
All right, and
according to the study.
All right, so some people on this panel don't want to participate in this story very much, so I want to tell you guys what I found interesting about it. Domestic violence and general repression of your wife and not treating your wife well also led, and denial of sexual positions also led to cheating, which I think it's good to point out that most forms of repression of women tend to have the opposite effect. So, like, to all the people who think that they can control their wives and their daughters and all that and force them to do things that they don't want to do, it's not really going to work out for you. So I found that as a positive in this story.
Right. To sort of build on that, Sean, a good example we can do is talk about some Islamic countries, especially Iran. Now, there's been a lot of news stories, or there's been a few stories coming out of Iran and people talking to Iranian women and saying that because they have so much repression there, that these people will literally have giant swimming pool orgies together. It's just like a mass of just naked people in a pool. And that has to do a lot with this repression. Like, the more you try to control a woman or a populace, especially when it comes to sex, the more that they're going to want to act out. So I think that's kind of a point that I wanted to bring up to add to yours, Sean.
And another thing I wanted to point out is these men were given 15-inch rulers, and I think it would have been smart of the people conducting the study to give different sized rulers if you were going to study how much people lie about the size of their Johnson, because I have a feeling if you get a 15-inch ruler, you're going to try and go at least more than half of that, as opposed to getting a 12-inch ruler. So, like, that would have been an interesting way to control the results of this experiment. And the other, that's a less substantive, more methodology point. And the other interesting thing that I took away from this is it's okay to be a member of the small boys club.
You know what? Because there are studies that say that it's not the length that really is the issue. Because this is like science. Like, most of the nerve endings in the vagina are quite near the surface, near the entrance. So, It doesn't matter if you got a long Johnson or a short stubby, you know. The length doesn't really matter as much, from what I hear from some of the studies.
What if yours is like a pancake? Like it's 2 inches. It's 2 inches long, but 30 inches thick, so it's like a pancake.
The technical name for that is called a chode, I believe.
All right. So now that we've destroyed any credibility that we have in the news,
Jordan
the politics department here, we should probably close out the show. I'm just gonna end it with, you want a clickbait? You got clickbait.
Wait, there's also one more thing, Jeff. You should throw out the how our audience members could join us on the future show and talk about these interesting stories.
Well, yes, I will get to it once we close out the show. If anybody has anything left to add, by the way, before we move on.
Yes, I would like to say that I don't present very many stories on this show, and the fact that my esteemed panelists went and kamikaze this story for me, it makes me feel very hurt. I mean, we were just talking about gigantic fisherman penises and how that makes your wife feel, and you know what? I'm doing the best that I can out here, and I don't appreciate that very much, guys.
Basically, it's I hear Ann Romney saying, "Stop it! This is hard." And, of course, the irony saying this is hard when relating to a penis story.
Yeah, it's very hard to present, and I really went out on a limb for you guys. And, I wanted to delve
if you guys would
into the
just
story.
Indulge him just a little bit here.
We wanted to go deep into the story, and things just got messy.
I'll just have you know that I am a huge pervert, so just to let you know. Anyway, now that we have alienated the audience, we will close out the show.
And the panel.
And the panel. All right, so thank you everybody for watching TYT Community tonight. We really appreciate you watching on the live stream and giving us a like and subscribing to our channel. We do a live stream, of course, every Thursday and Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. Thursday nights is the News and Politics Hour, and some of the other fun discussions we also have that are not news and politics related, social issues and discussion. And on Friday nights, make sure to tune in to TYT Community, the Social Justice Hour, hosted by my co-host, my lovely co-host, Rhiannon Avenine, on Friday nights, like I said, starting at 9 p.m. Eastern. Join us for that show. Lots of good social justice issues. We're fighting for, we're fighting for the homeless. We're fighting for people to get paid better than minimum wage. We are basically fighting for you guys. So, and the things that matter to you. So, with that said, make sure to, of course, join us on those shows. Follow us on our page, like us on our Facebook page, facebook.com/TYTNation. Follow me on the Twitter, at TYT Community and at Jeff Politics. If you want to follow me personally. And if you want to, of course, make sure to, if you really support the show, you want to see us grow, of course, make sure to donate to our Patreon campaign or consider it. So we really appreciate that, but most of all, we really appreciate you guys that come here every Thursday and Friday night and watch us for kind of strange idiots.
Wait, Jeff, how would one of our esteemed audience members get on the show if they wanted to participate?
Why, that's an excellent question. You can email me at jeffw@tytnetwork.com or join our Facebook, ask to join our Facebook group, TYT Community Regulars, on Facebook. And you send us basically an invitation showing that you want to join us. We'll accept it, and you can be part of the TYT Community panel. So we look forward to seeing you guys. But until then, we'll see you guys tomorrow night. You guys have a fantastic night. We'll see you later. Say goodbye, everybody.
Good night. God bless.
Bye.
Penis.
We'll see you tomorrow.